I'm not sure why there were technical issues there, but we're all fixed and we're all ready to go. Appreciate you guys. Um, okay, awesome. A few things to talk about before we get going. As I was saying earlier, it's Percy's birthday. That's why he's here. Also, he likes, when I start talking, he always comes over and checks out what's going on. But there you go. Bye, dog. All right. It's Percy's birthday. Not that that matters, but Um, appreciate you guys. Homework. Just so we can be clear on everything that's going on. Thank you guys so much. I'm sure it means a lot to him. I'll tell him everybody said happy birthday to him. Um, Homework. So tonight, what we have, there's going to be 5-question homework that goes live at 11. It's going to be fairly straightforward, but it's going to also be a kind of a review over the notes we've taken so far. And that's going to combine with the assignment that we have on Wednesday. So there's going to be another 5 questions. 3 of them are multiple choice. 2 of them are one of them's, a double check that you watch the live stream. And the other one is going to be a short answer, really quite easy, just to get you into the flow. And then on Wednesday, we'll have the same thing. What I'm going to be doing is I'm going to be combining those 2 together to get a total grade. I know grades are not working the same way as they normally would if we were in school. But basically, as we said, we're doing this kind of like religion, pass, fail. So if you do not pass with an 80 on any assignment that I give out, you will be required to redo it in order to receive credit. And if you don't receive credit, you do not graduate technically. So make sure you are getting those done. For most of you, it's not going to be a big issue. Okay, it's just get your homework done on time. Actually, turn it in. But I know that I'm looking at some of the people who didn't turn in last week's test assignment just to see. I have like 15 people. So that's going to be a difficult situation for them. Because while I'm not counting that one towards your overall grade, but if you're not watching the live streams, if you're not actually participating, you are not going to receive credit. One of the questions, at least per week, is just going to be a check that you're watching the live stream. I will tell you the question in just a little bit, and you're going to write whatever answer you have for that. Last time it was Percy. This time it's going to be a little different. I've explained it a little bit more. I've received a lot of questions about spelling and typos and stuff. I obviously don't care about typos. It's not a big deal to me, especially with how finicky it likes to be with capitalization and stuff like that. So if I have a short answer question that's graded and you get it wrong because you spelled something wrong, do not worry. You'll receive full credit. I'm not just going to skim through and not count that. Pearson, before today's meetup at 1:30, I would like at least a few people to go on and check that out. See if that is working for you or not. I've had some issues myself. I think the servers are a little bit overloaded. So if you could check that out at some point, I would really appreciate it. The homework questions, 2 of them come directly from there. So reading along with what I'm doing should be able to help you guys out. Works for you, says Matthew. That's awesome. Again, just everybody else, just double check if you possibly could. Matthew, I think you're in the wrong live stream thread. If you could go back to 323, that would be appreciated. So I'm not getting confused and everything's all going everywhere. But that's fine. If you're watching this recording on YouTube or on Twitch past broadcasts, remember we have chat.google.com that is open and ready for you. That is open for you guys to review the comments from the live stream if you'd like. You can also use it for asking me questions. My quote unquote office hours are going to be from 2 to 4 every Monday and Wednesday. So if I were you, this is something I would do. I would tune in at 10:30 to watch this broadcast. It's going to go from 10:30 to probably not later than 11:15 most days, unless I have technical issues, which it might cause it to go a little bit longer. At that point, after that's done, I would finish the homework for me that day, It really should not take you very long most days. We may be doing a project in the future that will look a little different, but for this type of broadcast, the homework is done really very very quickly. Take about, I'd say, no more than 15 minutes to get that done. Then, if you have any issues while you're doing it, if you're not sure, you can't find a piece of information, you tried to look up Pearson and it's not working. Then at 2 to 4, you can come back to this chat right here, open up a new thread yourself. I believe you have the ability to do that. If not, just respond to the live stream thread from today. Ask me any questions that you want. If you want to meet face to face, I will open up Zoom or Google Hangouts or whatever I need to, so I can talk directly with you. Help you out with questions. If you're struggling finding any bit of information, you can do that. I'll help you guys out. Also, keep in mind, these are always recorded. So if you need to go back because you missed a piece of information, you missed a piece of notes that you need to just double check, you can do that, and you can skip really quickly through just to find some of my PowerPoints if that's what you're looking for. Just a word of advice to all of you guys out there who are watching or doing watching the live stream recording. What's going to happen with RenWeb? What's going to be on there? That's a very good question. I think we need to talk a little bit more about that with some of the other teachers. So thank you for that question. That's something maybe we'll try and bring up today at the Hangout. If you could ask that question, then that would be awesome, Gage. I really do appreciate that. I hope we can still use it to show some of your grades on there, but it's with everything being a little weird, just hang on there. If you are not up to what I need you to be in this class, I will find a way to contact you and make sure that is handled the way that we need to. So, all right, I think that's about it. Do we have any other questions before we get going? Because that was a really good one. You have me right now. So, you have anything else? All right. So, moving back into the notes from last time, we only have a bit to go through because I do want you to have enough time to finish your assignment for today. We're taking a look at the costs of the Korean War. Now, as you probably know, the U.S. it's not one of the most devastating wars for the United States in terms of lives lost. It's probably why it kind of gets lost in between World War II and Vietnam. You can see here on our graph that U.S. military only lost about 100,000 or so. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't a devastating enough war in other ways. Obviously, you can see North Korea, South Korea, and China lost plenty of troops in this conflict. But also, I want you to take a look down here at the numbers for the cost in terms of dollars for the United States. Each one of those symbols is $1 billion. So can anybody tell me, how much did it cost the United States? Grace says, what about the spring musical? Too early to say. Anybody have an answer for me? Count them up, guys. 30 billion. 30 billion. Well done. Can anybody now look at British Commonwealth down there? Thank you, Kira, Melissa, Haley. Haley, I'm glad you were able to connect. I'm sorry for those technical difficulties. Can anybody tell me how about Britain down there? Just curious. See if you can figure out what that means. But yeah, $30 billion for a war that is happening across an ocean, and honestly there's not a ton at stake for the United States directly. Now, obviously, they had their own reasons that we've already talked about for getting involved, but that's incredibly expensive. So Matthew says 50 million for British Commonwealth. Well done. Yes, that's exactly what it is. So you can see each one of those dollar stacks is 1 billion because each one of those dollars is 100 million, and you can see there's only half a dollar there. It's kind of a weird way to look at it. I really appreciate you taking that chance there to analyze that. Yeah, 50 million. Well done. And then, of course, you can see over here on the right, families becoming separated. You have 650,000 people moving from North Korea to South Korea, and 5,000 divided family members in South Korea who were allowed to meet relatives living in North Korea since 1953. So obviously, you're dividing families. Anytime you put this big barrier in the middle of this piece of land, there's going to be family on both sides. And you can understand why 650,000 people are moving from North Korea to South Korea as well. They're trying to get to the place where they can be even more prosperous, hopefully, um, at least that's the goal. Hayden, I believe you are still in the wrong live stream thread. Please go to 323 if you can. Just double check the top. Um, but yeah, the correct answer was 50 million. Sorry. All right. So you can see just how expensive this is for the United States as they're trying to spend as much money as they can to, you know, help capitalism throughout the world right now. But back at home, we still have the fears from the Cold War spreading, and you can see the world is now getting involved. So in 1959, Soviet leader Nikita Khrushchev spoke to the United Nations, gave a fierce speech that made waves throughout the world. Look at that picture. I believe that is him just holding his shoe. He literally took off his shoe and banged it on the desk as he was presenting in front of the entire United Nations. Um, it started off as a calm, reasonable speech about denuclearization, about both sides trying to stop production of nuclear bombs, because both sides didn't want to be the first one that shut down production, right? If you're the United States, why do you need to build atomic bombs? Because they have it. And how can we be sure that they're not building atomic bombs and we just better build them instead ourselves, just in case? Psycho, he certainly was a interesting person there, Hayden, and somebody that your grandparents probably remember very distinctly. He again had one. He had a bit of that cult of personality behind him as well. He was impassioned leader. He spoke fiercely and inspired a lot of loyalty. Um, and he was actually the leader that more or less succeeded Stalin. There was a little bit in between there, to be honest, but he was the Soviet premier for a while after Stalin's death in 1953, I believe it was, um, and became this face for this Cold War again against the USSR. Um, so the US and the USSR competing for potential allies across the globe. We saw that with Korea, North Korea, South Korea, both being backed by one side or the other. And now they're going to turn their attention elsewhere because after World War II, you had many colonies across the globe demanding and winning independence from Europe or from other powers like the United States. So, and this particular was in a few different areas. We're going to look at Africa. We're going to look at South Asia and some other areas as well, where colonies are finally breaking away and becoming their independent countries. So, with these independent countries, it begs the question: how are they going to set up and run their government? Are they going to be capitalist, communist, somewhere in between? And they're competing to try and leverage their influence over these specific nations. So, the Soviets gave rebel forces economic and military aid in places like Africa, while the U.S. is forced into difficult decisions, right? Because the U.S. was a force for decolonization or the breaking away of a lot of nations from their European, the countries that own them in Europe. Think Panama, think Cuba. Um, they were especially influential in Latin America, South America as well. And now having to ask those questions: do we support our allies that we just fought world wars world wars with, like United Kingdom, France, or do we support these new colonists who are or these new colonies, not colonists, colonies who are trying to break away and become independent countries? Do we support them instead? And then, of course, if you have the USSR, am I echoing again? I don't even know how that. No, no, I'm not. Okay. What is the lesson title? We are still on lesson 2, Melissa. So that was Korea and other post-war conflicts. Sorry. Yeah. Am I echoing for anybody else? No? No? Nah. Okay. Double check that you didn't accidentally open up 2 different broadcasts of me, Alyssa, because that's generally what would happen there. Appreciate you guys. Yeah. All right. So, U.S. forced into these difficult decisions, and you have the Soviets who sometimes are backing these colonists, and it feels like, well, I gotta go against that, right? Or the Soviets not getting involved, and it's like, do we support some of these colonies against our European allies? It's not an easy spot to be in. So, a lot of the times they would either offer light support or try and stay out, but it was very important that they try and spread their influence as much as they can because this is now a global issue. And you can see just by this map the United States and key allied nations against Soviet Union and some of their allied nations. It kind of breaks off at certain points, and you can see how that's divided. Okay. So we have the United States, Canada, Greenland, Iceland, West Germany, UK, France, Portugal, Spain, all of these sweeping along in uh, West Europe against USSR, which and most of Eastern Europe, Mongolia, China down here, North Korea. We're gonna get to Vietnam. Don't worry. Um, so really a global issue, and you have a lot of these South American countries, Africa, who are trying to get pulled in one way or another by both sides, but are not as key parts to this quite yet. Yeah, Australia. Remember, Australia has a lot of is influenced very strongly by the United Kingdom. That's who originally owned Australia. Obviously, English speaking, so close connections in those ways as well. And yes, they're definitely a key part of this as well. All right. So, as we were talking about, these colonies trying to gain independence across the globe. In 1946, U.S. grants independence to its colony in the Philippines. They struggle for a while to set up a stable government, and it takes quite a long time for them to become a more, again, stable country. During the 50s and 60s, you had more than 30 African nations winning freedom from European rule. Just looking at this map of Africa right now, from 1959, you can see it's finally starting to take shape into what we have today. But out of any part of this map, it's probably the most different to what we have nowadays. US and the USSR would back opposing sides in many of these conflicts, trying to, again, gain influence over these countries that are finally breaking free. And in 1947, you had India winning independence from Britain. Soon, the Indian subcontinent was divided into 2 nations, India and Pakistan. India kind of stays neutral. They were breaking away from the United Kingdom, but didn't want to get completely apart from the capitalism that allowed them to be prosperous. They didn't want to. They did not adopt communism. Instead, they just kind of stayed out. Pakistan, though, wanted to break away from India and became an ally of the United States. They were nervous about the close proximity of the USSR and China, as you can see, borders right here in many of these areas. So they became an ally of the United States in that part of the world. All right, but we're going to take a look at now fears at home throughout this Cold War and how that affected culture in the United States. So many back at home worried about communists and the potential of communism spreading throughout the United States secretly, because nobody really wanted to be an open communist in this period of time. The U.S. had just won a great victory. Nationalism was nationalism was very high. There was a lot of support and faith in the country, and there wasn't a ton of people who wanted to speak out Against that. Wait, you didn't get it all? I'll go back. Sorry. Thank you for saying that. That's why it's important you guys are here. Of course, if you're watching it the live stream, you could just pause to get everything down. That's fine too. All right. So a lot of fears. When are we going to do the space race? We're going to get to that, Gage. I believe that is part of this. That's part of this unit. Yeah, that would be. We'll get there. Don't worry. All right, Grace, just let me know when you're ready to go on. Yeah, as Gage was saying, the space race kind of plays into this whole Cold War. It's a little bit later on, but we will get there. Right now, we're still kind of dealing with the 40s and early 50s. How many lessons are in this unit? 7. So we're gonna have to kind of pick up the pace starting on Wednesday. See if we can get through most of lesson 3 on Wednesday. All right, thank you, Grace. All right, thank you, Grace. Oh, that was echo. Sorry about that. Here we go. So, there are several Americans who preferred communism during the Great Depression. Remember, we talked about how economic hardship can spark a revolution in terms of the way that the economy is set up. And in places like Germany, you had complete overhaul of the system and radical changes. So even during the Great Depression, there were some people who tried to spark a rise to communism in the United States, but they didn't gain a whole lot of traction. And most of these people also viewed the methods of Stalin and the USSR as way too brutal and not the way that this should go. Again, it's a pretty radical change in viewpoint, but it doesn't necessarily mean that they're bad people. They just viewed the capitalist system as not working, and it wasn't during the Great Depression. It helped them get out, but there's a reason why they were upset. But this rise of this potential communist movement now was looked upon in a completely different light. A lot of people who were perhaps former proponents of communism were now viewed with a lot of fear and hatred. As Haley said, how many lessons in the unit? 7 of them. If you haven't checked Pearson, you should be able to see it there. Anyway, so many people in Canada, Britain, and the US were actually arrested as Soviet spies as well. Remember, we're going to get into the space race, but also what's going on during this time is that both the US and the USSR are competing in many different levels, and one of those is technologically. They are both working to develop technology as best as they can so they can be the premier nation in the world, the best in these different fields. And of course, one of the ways technology is used is through war. So the United States had developed the atomic bomb a few years ago, and now the USSR wants to have that power as well, because they knew if they didn't get it, then the US could kind of wield that power over everybody else. So some of those secrets in developing those bombs were leaked over to the USSR, and it allowed them to help develop their own bomb, which we've already talked about. So they started seeing many of these spies in these countries posing as normal American citizens, but secretly they had another agenda. And the most famous of these spies was Ethel and Julius Rosenberg. So the Rosenbergs, they were convicted of espionage and executed in 1953. We're going to take a quick look at those and kind of the controversy around them. But all right, take a quick break here for question 4. So on your homework, that is opening up in 2 minutes. This question 4 is a bit silly, I know, but it's just to make sure you are paying attention. So question 4, with the new outbreak, of course, people are saying how dangerous it is to shake hands, to high five, to even fist bump can be dangerous. So we have to come up with a different form of greeting one another, right? That doesn't require touching each other. Some people have gone with the elbow bump, but my personal favorite is the finger guns. I know it's a little bit silly, but that's kind of the point. It's kind of fun. So, question 4. What's your favorite method of greeting people that does not require physical contact? There you go. Question 4. If you didn't jot that down, there you go. If you have any questions about that, leave it in the chat and I'll answer it. But again, it's just to make sure you're watching this. So if you're watching it on broadcast or watching it live, now you've got that down. All right, let's watch the video. I'm going to mute myself so there's no echo.
Morton Sobel, the principal in America's first atomic spy trial, leaves New York's federal court. An electronics expert, he's accused with Julius Rosenberg, electrical engineer, of conspiring to give Russia vital secrets of the atom bomb. Rosenberg's wife is also accused of complicity in the plot against the country's security.
In 1950, America's post-war Red Scare began, triggered by Senator Joseph McCarthy's claim that American citizens were working as spies for the USSR. He might have been describing Julius Rosenberg.
So the Rosenbergs were a couple who met in New York. They were both children of immigrants, Jewish immigrants, and they were members of the Communist Party. They were both communists in the sense that they belonged to radical organizations that had affiliated with the Communist Party. They were involved in unions, and they met each other through their radicalism.
Rosenberg was an engineer with the U.S. Army Signal Corps and a member of a spy ring that included Morton Sobel and Ethel Rosenberg's brother, David Greenglass. After the conspiracy was uncovered in 1950, the Rosenbergs became the only members not to make a deal with the prosecutors.
Julius Rosenberg will not give names. He maintains his innocence all along, and that of Ethel. Neither one of them will give names. The two have children. They have 2 sons. They wind up in Sing Sing prison.
The Rosenbergs were convicted on March 29, 1951, and sentenced to death, a sentence carried out on June 19, 1953.
The electric chair awaited the 2 convicted spies as the hour of their final reckoning approached, and then it was over. Julius and Ethel Rosenberg had paid their debt to society with their lives. For the first time in its 177-year history, a United States civil court had decreed and followed through on the execution of 2 native-born Americans on the charge of espionage.
The Rosenberg sons spent decades trying to clear their parents' names, but declassified information has since confirmed that Julius Rosenberg was indeed guilty of passing on American secrets.
But it's pretty clear that he was probably a small fry spy in terms of the quality of the information he was giving. There were other spies who were passing along better information from the Manhattan Project. However, that information that all of them gave was important to the creation of a bomb by the Soviets. I think Ethel and Julius represent different legacies. I just don't think there was any reason at all to prosecute Ethel other than to go after Julius. That was craven. They did it because they could, because it made the national security state look strong, like they were doing something that had to be done. It's a complex legacy.
All right. So, getting back to it. You can see that there was legitimate reason behind some of this fear. That there were actual spies working against the United States and hurting them, actively sharing secrets to the USSR and working to try and, bring down much of what the U.S. stood for. So, with that in mind, we have a new Red Scare beginning throughout the United States as people are afraid of communism and what they stand for and any potential attacks from communists. And that leads to this, what's called McCarthyism. So you may have heard that term before. This is what that's talking about. So in 1950, Senator Joseph McCarthy made a shocking announcement. He claimed to have a list of 205 State Department employees who were supposedly Communist Party members. Pretty shocking to much of the world. Again, he's come in public and saying this. Now news spreading throughout the United States. When that list was investigated, didn't find nearly as much evidence behind what he was saying, but it was still that push out there that was stirring up a lot of fears in many people. He even accused Adlai Stevenson, who we talked about as the opponent to Eisenhower in the 52 election, as having communist ties, and many people working for him. So this spreads throughout the rest of the country as well, not just in the government, but you have many Americans who are now afraid of their very neighbors of being communist spies. And then with these continued revelations of, oh, these people arrested as spies, these people, they felt like normal citizens to many, and it continued to stir up these fears. So you had businesses and colleges questioning loyalty of many who worked and attended, and it kind of became this way of threatening people, suppressing opposing opinions through these charges of disloyalty, communism, espionage, all of this terrible stuff. Let's say you disagree with something that the government's doing. Let's say you don't agree with the going to war against Korea. You think generally that's a bad idea. You're spending way too much money and losing American lives. Well, somebody who supported it might say, well, why are you against this? Are you some sort of communist? I mean, come on, we're supporting America. Those types of things. And that continued to spread throughout the country in many, many, many different ways. That this idea of, well, if you're not 100% American, if you're not supporting America in this ways, well, then you might not be American at all. You're a communist. Just kind of getting out of control at certain points. In 1954, McCarthy comes forward and accuses communists of being involved in the U.S. Army. And many people viewed that as going way too far. He was censured, which basically says, we do not agree, you need to stop, you are terrible, out of control, and he lost most of his support. He goes to one of these trials where they kind of accuse, trying to see why he's saying such reckless things, and he kind of just continues to ramble and go off, and the prosecutor says, have you no sense of decency, sir? And that's kind of a famous quote from that period of time. So McCarthyism continues to spread. And just because McCarthy loses support doesn't mean that there's still not a little bit of that left in much of America. People are suspicious of those who criticize the government, who are against many of these, capitalist ideas. And even to today, if you don't agree with everything that one side says, you may be completely condemned. And you can see sort of those parallels in today's politics, as I was saying. Let's say you're on one side or another. Let's say you're a Republican, but you don't fully support the president. Then a lot of Republicans may completely shun you because you have slightly different opinions. Same thing with the Democrats. Let's say you don't support one of these policies, they're going to completely shun you just because of one thing you disagree. It's a hard stance to take, and it continues to spread out of control even to today, where if you have even a little bit of differing opinion, you could be completely shut down by many people on one side or another. It's a dangerous, dangerous thing, and it's kind of a lesson that we need to make sure we are keeping in mind even to today. All right, that is the end of lesson 2. Lesson 3 we'll be moving on to is Eisenhower and post-war America. So if you want to jot that down on your note sheet, you can. Otherwise, this is where we're going to be picking up on Wednesday. Has anybody gotten a chance to look at the homework already? I have. Okay. Awesome. I assume it posted just fine. If you have any questions about it, you can either, number one, you can leave a comment on Google Classroom. Obviously, I'll be able to see that and help you out. Yeah, you finished it. Well done. I'm not surprised. It does not take too long. And then, so if you have a question, you can post there, or you can post in this live stream thread right here. I will try and help you guys out over the next few minutes. I'm going to be heading over to my mom's house for broadcast this afternoon, so it'll be a little different. Also, can you post this week's schedule on the Classroom, please? Yeah, sure. It's every week is the same. I broadcast on Wednesday, on Monday and Wednesday, and we have homework each day. Awesome. So I'm glad you guys are working on that. I'll post something on my Classroom. Don't worry. What was number 4 again? Says Garrett. Thank you for asking. I'm going to cut off the recording here. So if you're watching this on replay, you can't just skip to the end. But since you're live, I'll do it. Bye if you're watching on YouTube.